been a whirlwind period of time since Christian Horner was deposed, as it were, as CEO and team principal at Red Bull Racing. And it's interesting because all of the team got together. Obviously, they were in the factory for the announcement, but the actual racing team got together at Silverstone yesterday for a filming day. Now, this has nothing to do with Horner's departure. This was always planned. And so they all were there together, sort of solidarity, business as usual. But there was a muted feeling, talking to members of the team, engineers and mechanics, feeling a bit dented, I think, by it, because he was a very popular figure in the team, a very integral heartbeat of the team, and he's no longer there. And that creates some sadness. Some people have worked with him the whole time through Red Bull, through its 20 years, and also uncertainty about the future and what that means. We saw Horner's address to staff, which actually ended quite emotionally. You could hear the crack in his voice. That was leaked. But again, speaking to people in the team, he wasn't the only one to feel that emotion. There were talks of people breaking down in tears in the aftermath of that speech. So, yeah, there's a lot. It's a roller coaster of emotions at the team. But interestingly, Silverstone was an opportunity for Horner's replacement, Laurent Mekies, to front face the team, to shake hands, touch flesh with the Red Bull Racing engineers and mechanics. And, he's also a popular figure in wider Red Bull. He's been there for a long time, and there's a lot of warmth for him. And all eyes will be on him to see if he can turn things around and if he's the right man to lead the team to a new and potentially exciting era. The top three things in Laurent Mekies' in my view, is one, to try and make this year's car quicker. The championship is halfway through. They're falling well behind McLaren. The car needs to be quicker, needs to be more competitive, and they're doing things to work on that. We've talked about these floor upgrades at various points, and that'll continue going for the foreseeable future. Whether they close the gap on McLaren, that's a hard one to answer, but they'll be pushing. A Helmut Marko was talking about still going for the Drivers' Championship until it's mathematically impossible. So that's kind of one element. A second thing in the in-tray is to focus on next year's car. And the powertrains, they're going in-house, building their own engine for the first time, which we talked about. Now, that sort of 1 and 2 element are together. They're already focusing on this year's car, but they're already focusing on next year's car. And at some point, that percentage gets bigger for the 2026 car than the 2025. So, where that percentage is exactly is probably hard to quantify, but that focus on 26 is going to get bigger. And you would imagine as they fall, and if they fall further behind McLaren, then more and more percentage of time will be onto 26, because not that it's a lost cause this season, but that's such a seismic change in regulations and how things are going to be done. They need to turn to that. And a monstrously important thing, big on the to-do list, is to get Max Verstappen to stay. So we know that there's been ongoing talks with Mercedes, and we know how important Verstappen is to the team. The team, everything's built around him. So he'll be working, I would think, quite a lot with Verstappen's team to talk that through. Now, the Max Verstappen potentially leaving Red Bull is not a new subject. We had it last year. We saw it very clearly and keenly, and he did stay put. It re-emerged quite publicly 2 races ago in Austria. To be fair, begun by George Russell rather than Camp Verstappen. In the FIA drivers' press conference on the Thursday, George Russell said, ongoing talks with Mercedes and Max Verstappen, bam. So we've talked about the different things at play there. We had Toto Wolff, the Mercedes boss, respond to it. We had Verstappen talk about it, or be a bit dismissive of it because he's bored of talking about it. Made that quite clear. And we had Christian Horner talking about it. The party line is Max has a contract until 2028 with Red Bull, but like all of these things, if someone's unhappy, there's different ways to find a way out of it. One key part of it is a performance clause in his contract. If he's not in the top 3 by the summer break, so in 2 races' time, when things cut off for the forced summer break for a few weeks, if he's not in the top 3, he can leave. So you're Max Verstappen, you've won 4 world titles, you would like to have 7 world titles, like a Lewis Hamilton, for example. So you're going to look to wherever the best team is. Next season, we don't know who that best team is. McLaren is currently the best team, but there's new regulations coming into play, new power units. The whispers are that Mercedes have the quickest engine. It's one of those funny ones. Is there full credence to that or not? And will that translate to Mercedes, the works team, be the quickest? Or will it be perhaps a McLaren who have the Mercedes engine, or a Williams who've focused very heavily on 2026 rather than 2025? Inevitably, there's a lot of conjecture about where Max Verstappen will end up next season. To my mind, that's Red Bull. It doesn't make any sense at this stage for him to make a cross-grid switch to Mercedes. Yeah, so if you talk about Camp Verstappen, Team Verstappen, however you want to term it, there's very key figures. Obviously, Max is within that, but then there's his dad, Jos, who was a Formula One driver in his own right for Arrows and Benetton. and has been integral in Max's career. You know, they did this thing together, building him up from this young Carter to the superstar of the sport that he is now. And he's a very influential figure, and we know that relations were strained with Jos Verstappen and Christian Horner. So while Max has always had good relations with Christian, Jos and Christian not so, and we've seen that quite publicly. So he's one part there. There's also Raymond Vermeulen, who's Max Verstappen's manager. So all the deals, you know, new contracts, sponsorship things, etc., like that. Raymond is integral to that. Both Raymond's at most races. I'm not sure if he was actually at Silverstone, but Jos is not at all races, but he certainly was at Silverstone. And then another key figure within the Verstappen camp is Helmut Marko. Now, we've talked about Helmut Marko a lot. We've spoken to Helmut Marko on this podcast. Now, he describes himself as a director of Red Bull Racing, but he's more than that. He was the initial person set up by the founder, Dietrich Mateschitz, to build this company. And it was him that appointed Christian Horner, 20 years ago, which is surreal in itself. And while, he's been key in bringing through people like Verstappen and Sebastian Vettel and other drivers through the academy, he's also very much leaning to the Verstappen camp. We saw there was some talk last season about, Verstappen leaving, even about Helmut Marko leaving, and the two are quite aligned. I think Verstappen made it clear that, Helmut Marko has to stay with him. They've got a very good relationship. He's got an incredible knowledge. I mean, he's 82 or something, but he has a lot of experience as a racer himself in Formula One, but he knows what's needed to get the best out of the driver. So if you talk about the key dynamics of Team Verstappen, those would be the primary figures. One of the things that's very telling, and Christian Horner says it himself in his address to the team, is that he's been removed from operational duties. Now, he's not officially deposed. He's still on Red Bull's books. He's still an employee. Now, that doesn't mean to say he's going to have a sudden turnaround and they're going to change their mind and he's going to stay put. What's happening is they're trying to thrash out the deal, the terms of severance and his part in the company. And you would imagine lawyers for both parties are working quite heavily on that. Now, Horner was on a contract believed to be about £12 million a year, which is a sizable amount of money, and that had some time to run. So there's talk that this payout could be as much as £50 million. Now, I'm not inside the inner workings of that dealing. That's not going to be a quick fix. That's going to take a period of time for that to be solved. Understandably, he's not saying anything because he obviously can't. But then, interestingly, we're not hearing anything from Red Bull Austria at all, the parent company. So we're hearing little bits from speaking to team members on the ground, but from Red Bull Austria, it's nothing. Now, their approach as a firm, this big company, has always been to sort of say nothing. Their PR messages say nothing, and they're asked again, still say nothing. That's not really changing. As for what next for Christian Horner, if I were him, it would be a very long, relaxing holiday and spending some time with family. And I actually do think after all these negotiations have been sorted out, that's exactly what he'll do. As for the what next, it's fascinating beyond that, where he emerges. We've heard of Alpine links, we've heard of Ferrari links. I'm sure there'll be others. And teams would be silly not to look at him. He's got an amazing CV of what he's achieved at this team, where he arrived as a 31-year-old team boss with low expectations for the rest of the grid. Everyone going, gosh, who's this upstart and who's this team of upstarts? And yet he managed to lead a team that won 6 Constructors' Championships, 8 Drivers' titles, and 124 Grand Prix. That's impressive. So people would be stupid not to look at him. It's interesting because when I spoke to him, he gave off that impression when we had this hour-long sit-down, and we're going back May, so it's not loads ago, but a few weeks ago. And I think it's, as far as I can tell, it's very much the last big interview he did as team principal and CEO. He sounded like a Red Bull lifer. Despite the links of being elsewhere, he was committed, and he sounded as committed, competitive, and motivated as ever. And obviously that's not turned out that way. But knowing him and the competitor he is, he'll have unfinished business in Formula One. He'll like to prove some people wrong, prove points. And I'm excited to see where he turns up and when. Thanks for watching. And also do get in touch if you've got further questions about Christian Horner's departure, Max Verstappen's future, or anything else for that we'd like to hear about them. Now, the Inside Track is funded and made by BBC Studios, a commercial company that's wholly owned by the BBC. It's produced by James Cook, and video editing and social media is by Georgina Revel.